Greetings everybody, welcome back to Billy Bobbers. Today I'm going to talk about throttle cables. If you're going to remove the airbox like I did and go with pod filters versus using the airbox setup, you're going to have to consider what you're going to do about your throttle cables. The throttle cables are mounted to the top of the airbox, so if you remove the airbox, you're going to have to fabricate something for those throttle cables to rest on so they can actuate properly. What I did was I made this bracket, and this bracket, instead of the throttle cables mounting to the airbox, they rest on this bracket which mounts to the tank mount. Now before I start showing you this bracket, how I did this bracket, I want to touch on the tank mount. The tank mount mounts directly to the frame, and what I do with this bracket is I mount the bracket on top of the tank mount frame, and then I put the bolts through it. When you see this later, and I'll show you how I do this, when you see this later, you might be asking, well, wouldn't it just be easier to put the tank mount right on top of the bracket and then run the bolts through it into the tank? Well, yeah, it probably would be easier and would be faster, but I don't want to do that because then I change the position of the tank from its original mounting. I don't want to do that. Instead, I want to leave the tank exactly as it mounts in its original configuration so that I don't change any of the position. I want the tank to rest as low as possible, as close to the frame as possible, because I think many of you know, looking at this bike, the tank kind of rests above the frame, so you can see those frames sticking out, and any adjustment to lifting this mount is going to raise that tank even higher off the frame and probably create some gaps. I don't want that. I want it to be as hugged up on the frame as possible. So I put this, when I mount this bracket, I mount it on top of the tank mount, and then put the bolts through it. So later on, when you see me put this mount together and I show you how that works, that's why I'm putting this bracket on top of the tank mount. So the bracket's pretty easy. All I did was I took some 16 gauge metal, and the first thing I did was I cut out a rectangular piece, and this piece is 2.5 by 4 inches. That's all it is, just 2.5 by 4 inches, pretty easy. That's the first piece. Set that piece aside. The next piece is this one. As you can see, this piece is different right here. So the first thing I did was I cut a 4 inch piece, just a 4 inch, another 4 inch rectangle. Now this one's a little bit different because you're gonna have to do some cutting. This one was, I think I cut a 4 inch by 3 inch this time, and 4 inch by 3 inch is what I did. And then what I had to do was 5/8, yeah, 4 inch by 3 inch, and then on the 3 inch side, these tangs right here are 5/8 apart, 5/8 inch. So I just measured in 5/8 this way, 5/8 this way, and then I came down 2 1/4. So then once you do that, let me bring this back over here so we don't hit the stand again. So I measured in 5/8 this way, 5/8 this way on this particular bracket right here, this piece, which is, like I said, 4 inches by 3 inches, then measure in 5/8, 5/8, and then measure down, as I said, measure down 2 1/4, and then cut out the negative. Once you get that out, it's out. After I had done that, I just took the frame, the tank mount, and I laid it right on top of it and measured it marked where the holes were for the tank mount, and then I cut those. And then I put both of the, after I drilled those 2 holes on each side, I took this tang piece and I put it right on the frame, and then I just bent up each side. It was really simple. I bent up each side to where, you know, it was pretty much perpendicular to the bike frame. So it rode right out. After doing that, I took the other flat piece, the 2.5 by 4 inch piece, and then I just simply welded that piece, tack welded it right across that flat tang piece. Now here's where I did something a little bit different though. Then I took a piece of angle iron, a 1-inch angle iron, and I cut it right down the joint. And after I cut it down the joint, I just cut another piece. I cut that angle iron to 2 3/4, so that it, and you can barely see it in there, but it's from here to here. That's the angle iron piece in there, just to give it some more rigidity. And then I simply tacked it. You can see it. I tacked it in there on top of all of this, tacked it in so that then I could drill through it for the throttle cable mounts. And for the throttle cable mount, pretty simple. All I have a box of these on hand, but they fit perfectly. And it's a couple of M6 bolts, really simple. M6 1x16, sorry about that. M6 1x16s, and then with some lock nuts on them at the bottom. Now the front lock nut, I had to cut it off to make some clearance for when it's mounted on. And that's due to the wires, the cables and things that run underneath. And I just didn't want them chafing off underneath there and then grounding out if they hit this. But I'll show you that here in just a moment. So it's a really simple thing that allows you to mount your throttle cables in the absence of your airbox if you want to delete your airbox. So without further ado, I'll show you how this works out. Okay, so like I said, this is where the tank mount is, of course. The first thing tank mount is going to go in, but you're going to have to slide, for this bracket, you're going to have to slide the throttle cable just underneath. So it's going to go inside, and then the tangs go right over top of the tank mount, just like I just done. Now, something I didn't mention before was when you make these brackets, you're going to have to create these little recesses in the tanks. And the reason you have to do that is because these tank mounts have these indents in them that create a little extra rigidity in the tank mount. It makes them stronger. It's just what they do in folded sheet metal to make sure that it gives it a little extra strength. So you're going to have to make sure that your tang accounts for that. Otherwise, it's just going to push them out and they're not going to fit in there properly. So something to think about. But once you put them on, you slide it in there. This all goes together. Then all you have to do is mount it in place, like I said, with your mount on top of the tank mount. And then as you can see, your throttle cables then rest in the space that they would have if you had your airbox here. And that will allow for your throttle cables to run back properly so that they actuate as they would normally. Without this setup, then there's going to be a lot of free play and probably slop, and you're not going to get the proper actuation when you try to accelerate. So if you have any questions about this setup, feel free to drop them in the comment section. I'll do my best to answer them as quick as possible, but you know, with work and me doing this on the side, sometimes I'm a little late, and I apologize for that, but I will try to do my best to get to it. So with that said, if you've got a project, man, make the time. See you next time.